With Valentina Shevchenko and Jon Jones both being heavy favorites heading into their respective title defenses, Chasel, which underdog has a better shot at an upset, Katlyn Chookagian or Dominick Reyes?
I think it's Dominick Reyes. Listen, Ariel, I really don't think there's a greater talent than Jon Jones. But Reyes does come with some question marks. One of them is he's younger than Jon Jones. Now, I know that Jon has fought some guys, Anthony Smith comes to mind, who've been younger than him, but you'll also agree with me, that was always the story of Jon's career. That's what happens when you become the youngest champion of all time. All of a sudden, he doesn't wear that hat in this one. Jon Jones has the reach that we hear so much about, but he doesn't have the height. If you just go look at Dominick Reyes, he's the bigger man. Now, I don't care what the scale says. The scale's going to say they're both 205 pounds, but you know what I mean. You look at a guy, you see his gait, you see how tall he is, you see the broadness in the shoulders. I just think that Reyes checks a lot of boxes, plus he's this big power hitter. Jon Jones has gotten to the point that he's so good that people that think Jon's going to lose a fight ever with anybody, it's because he has to get knocked out. That's a huge compliment to Jon Jones. If you're saying the only way you can beat a man is to put that man to sleep, I think that Reyes does offer this type of power. The problem, of course, nobody's even put Jon Jones down, let alone put Jon Jones out. I know that it's a little bit of a reach, but I do think that Reyes comes with a lot of questions marks, and I think it makes Reyes a pretty compelling opponent.
By the way, I have a confession to make because I'm a little embarrassed. I feel like I have to get this out. I was about to talk at the beginning of the round because you had already done 3 first and I did 1, and then they went to you, and now 4-1 in one episode. I mean, that's just, I've never seen this before. I'm taken aback by this, if I'm being honest. So I was getting ready. I was like, of course they're coming to me first, and then here I am sitting on my hands. Anyway.
Well, it's your big chance. It's your big moment, so take it.
Here I am.
The clock's ticking.
The answer has to be Katlyn Chookagian. Again, I have said this over and over again, and I'll say it again. The gap between Valentina Shevchenko and the rest of that weight class is bigger than any gap that we've ever seen between a champion and the contenders in said weight class. Even bigger than DJ back in the day and the rest of the male 125ers. And so I don't want to take anything away from Katlyn. She has earned this fight. She was the rightful number 1 contender. I'm glad they finally gave her this title shot. But there is just a big gap between Valentina and Katlyn. I would argue right now, I'm happy, by the way, that the UFC has split up the male and female pound-for-pound rankings. I didn't like that they put them all together. And I subscribe to this as well. But I would argue right now, Valentina Shevchenko is top 10 pound-for-pound best fighters on the planet regardless of gender. That's how high I think of her. And the thing about Valentina, which makes her so impressive and so dangerous, she does not lose focus. She does not kind of like take a training camp off. When you know she's about to fight, you know she's going to be in supreme shape. You know she's going to be, on her game. She's going to be laser focused. She is just that kind of person, that kind of fighter. So if she loses on Saturday, of course, if Dominick Reyes beats Jon Jones, that's a bigger story because of who Jon Jones is and what he's done and the fact that he's never technically lost a fight. So that's a bigger story from like a media perspective. But as far as like athletics are concerned, Katlyn beating Valentina is a bigger shocker to me, is a bigger upset to me because of the gap between the two.
I understand what you're saying. If we're piling praise on the bullet right now, let me just make sure we point out one other thing, Ariel. As good as we think she is, as good as we have seen her be, the one thing that you do have to keep in consideration when you're breaking her down, she gets better each fight. Helwani, she gets better each fight. What about the armbar she put on Jessica I? She did that perfectly. Jessica hung in there, so she just goes to a head kick to finish her in the next round. But I mean, when you watch her and you watch the gains that she's making, it's very rare that a champion of the world gets better. Ariel, why? Why would you need to be better if you're already the absolute best of anybody you're going to encounter? I don't know. I can't answer that for you. I can only tell you she is the champion of the world. She works very hard, and she is getting better, and that's scary.
And by the way, last I checked, Katlyn plus 750 underdog. I believe Dominick around a plus 430. And in 2019, Valentina Shevchenko fought Jessica I in Chicago in June, and Jessica I was a plus 850. And so there have been a bunch of plus 850s and plus 800s as of late as far as title fights are concerned. None of those people have ever won. So from a betting perspective, this would technically be the bigger deal. But of course, if Jon Jones loses, by the way, if Jon Jones wins on Saturday night, he will have broken a tie that he currently has with GSP. For the record of amount of victories in a UFC title title fight. They both have 13 on their resume. If Jones wins on Saturday, of course, he has 14, and he will stand alone atop that mountain. That's a really huge deal, and it makes you kind of wonder, how far along would he be had he not gotten into all that trouble over the past 10 years or so. So this would be a seismic upset, and it would also have a tremendous trickle-down effect as well, because then what happens if Jones loses? He sticks around at 205 probably, and they probably do the immediate rematch, and that puts a halt to the Izzy fight and the heavyweight fight and all that stuff and more. And I kind of get this Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva UFC 162 feel going into this fight where, this guy, no one knows about him, is going to shock the world. But let me just say, okay, you can't be upset. Could you really be upset right now? All I want to say is Katlyn winning is a pretty damn big deal. What could you possibly be upset about?
What am I upset about? That the clock ticked down, that you never threw it back to me, that we're in an argument. By the way, we're agreeing with each other. I literally said the exact same things you said, and then you argued with me about it. I happen to agree with you.
So we're good. So what are you upset about? Why are you raising your voice? We're good. I was just reinforcing the point.
It felt like the right thing to do.
Okay.
It felt like shouting was appropriate in that moment.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.